Before you scroll away, before you decide that this is just another video among thousands, competing for your attention, give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with loud music, dramatic headlines, or perfect timing. Sometimes it appears quietly, in a moment when your heart is tired, when you've been carrying things you never talk about, when you've been pretending you're okay even though something inside you feels broken. My love, there are things we spend our entire lives searching for: answers, understanding, peace, and the feeling that someone truly sees us. Yet so often, the very truth we need is standing right in front of us, and we walk away before we ever give it a chance to speak. Maybe you've been disappointed. Maybe you've trusted the wrong people. Maybe you've given your heart to those who never valued it, and because of that pain, you've learned to protect yourself. You've learned to leave before you can be hurt again. But what if the message you've been waiting for is hidden in the words you're about to hear? What if the thing that's been holding you back isn't your past, your failures, or the people who left, but a truth you've never allowed yourself to face? Today, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to tell you that life is easy, because it isn't. Life can be unfair. It can be lonely. It can test you in ways you never expected. But sometimes a single truth can change the way you see everything. And if you skip this video now, you may never hear the one message your heart has been needing all along. My love, before you decide that this message is not for you, before you tell yourself that you've heard it all before, I want you to stay for just a little longer. Not because I need your attention, not because I have something to sell you, but because there is a truth that many people spend their entire lives running from, and perhaps today is the day you stop running. The strange thing about truth is that it doesn't disappear when we ignore it. It waits. It waits in the silence after an argument. It waits in the empty spaces between our distractions. It waits in those moments late at night when the world finally becomes quiet and there is nothing left to hear except our own thoughts. Most people think they are searching for happiness. They spend years chasing success, approval, relationships, possessions, and achievements. They tell themselves that once they reach a certain destination, everything will finally make sense. They believe that peace exists somewhere outside themselves, waiting at the end of a long road. But what if the reason you still feel empty isn't because you haven't found enough? What if it's because you've been avoiding something that has always been inside you? Many of us become experts at distraction. We fill every moment with noise. We scroll endlessly. We stay busy. We surround ourselves with people. We convince ourselves that movement is progress. Yet deep down, there is often a voice we refuse to listen to. That voice knows things. It knows when you're pretending to be stronger than you feel. It knows when you're smiling only because you don't want anyone to ask questions. It knows when you've convinced yourself that you're fine, even though a part of you is still carrying wounds from years ago. The truth is that pain doesn't disappear simply because time passes. People often say that time heals all wounds, but time by itself heals very little. What heals is honesty. What heals is courage. What heals is the willingness to look directly at the things we've spent years trying to avoid. Maybe you've been hurt by someone you trusted. Maybe you've been abandoned when you needed support the most. Maybe you've given your heart to people who never understood its value. Maybe you've experienced losses so deep that even now you struggle to find words for them. And because of those experiences, you built walls. At first those walls felt necessary. They protected you. They helped you survive. They kept the pain from reaching you again. But over time something changed. The walls that protected you also began to imprison you. The same barriers that kept out disappointment also kept out connection. The same defenses that guarded your heart also prevented it from fully living. And, without realizing it, you began carrying a burden that grew heavier every year. You started believing stories about yourself. Stories that said you weren't enough. Stories that said you had to earn love. Stories that said your worth depended on what you accomplished. Stories that said vulnerability was weakness. Stories that said people always leave. Stories that said trust is dangerous. Stories that said happiness belongs to other people. The problem is that when we repeat these stories long enough, they begin to feel like facts. We stop questioning them. We stop examining them. We build our entire lives around them. And then one day we wake up wondering why we feel disconnected from ourselves. The truth you've been avoiding may not be complicated. In fact, the most important truths are often remarkably simple. You cannot hate yourself into becoming someone you love. You cannot shame yourself into healing. You cannot punish yourself into peace. You cannot spend years believing that you are broken and expect to feel whole. So many people are fighting battles that nobody can see. They wake up every day carrying invisible weight. Regret, guilt, fear, disappointment, loneliness, the memories of opportunities missed, the words they wish they could take back, the relationships that ended, the dreams that never happened, the versions of themselves they never became. And, because nobody else can see that weight, they assume they must carry it alone. But carrying something for a long time doesn't mean it belongs to you forever. Sometimes we hold on to pain because it feels familiar. Sometimes we cling to suffering because we don't know who we would be without it. Sometimes we stay attached to old wounds because healing would require us to step into germs. Pain may hurt, but at least it is familiar. Growth asks us to enter territory we cannot control. Growth asks us to trust what we cannot yet see. Growth asks us to release identities that no longer serve us. That is frightening. And yet there comes a moment in every person's life when avoiding the truth becomes more painful than facing it. A moment when the mask becomes too heavy. A moment when the pretending becomes exhausting. A moment when the distractions stop working. A moment when the heart quietly whispers that something has to change. Perhaps that moment is now. Perhaps the truth you've been avoiding is not that you're weak. Perhaps it's that you've been stronger than anyone realizes. Perhaps the truth is not that you're unworthy. Perhaps it's that we've spent too much time seeking validation from people who were never capable of giving it. Perhaps the truth is not that you're broken. Perhaps it's that you've survived experiences that would have crushed many others. Perhaps the truth is not that you have failed. Perhaps it's that you've been measuring your value using standards that were never meant for you. Life has a way of teaching lessons repeatedly until we finally pay attention. The same patterns return. The same fears appear. The same challenges emerge wearing different faces. Not because life wants to punish us, but because there is something we still need to understand. Something we still need to learn. Something we still need to accept. And acceptance is one of the hardest things a human being can practice. Accepting the past, accepting our mistakes, accepting our limitations, accepting that some questions may never have answers, accepting that some chapters end without closure, accepting that some people were meant to be part of our journey, but not part of our destination, accepting that healing is not a straight line, accepting that becoming whole requires patience, accepting that growth often happens in silence long before it becomes visible to anyone else. The truth doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it arrives quietly. A realization during a walk. A thought that appears unexpectedly. A feeling you can no longer ignore. A moment when you finally become tired of betraying yourself just to make others comfortable. A moment when you recognize that your life is too valuable to spend it hiding from your own heart. And when that moment comes, everything begins to shift. Not all at once. Not overnight, but slowly. One honest choice at a time. One courageous conversation at a time. One act of self-respect at a time. One moment of awareness at a time. One truth at a time. Because every meaningful transformation begins with the same simple decision. To stop running from what you already know deep inside, my love. One of the most painful discoveries we make in life is realizing that the same hurt keeps returning in different forms. The faces change. The places change. The circumstances change. Yet somehow the feeling remains familiar. You meet new people, but encounter the same disappointment. You start a new chapter, but find yourself facing the same fears. You promise yourself things will be different this time, only to find old wounds opening once again. For a long time, it may seem as though life is unfairly targeting you. It may feel as though fate has chosen the same lesson over and over again. But often, what repeats is not happening because the world is against you. What repeats is happening because there is something within you that still needs your attention. Unhealed pain has a strange way of shaping our choices. Without realizing it, we are drawn toward what feels familiar, even when familiar is hurting us. A person who grew up feeling ignored may find themselves chasing people who cannot fully see Them. A person who is taught that love must be earned may spend years exhausting themselves trying to prove their worth. A person who is betrayed may struggle to trust even those who genuinely care. The wound becomes a lens through which life is viewed, and until that lens changes, the scenery may look different, but the experience remains the same. This is why healing matters. Not because it erases the past, not because it pretends the pain never happened, but because it prevents yesterday from controlling tomorrow. Many people spend years blaming themselves for patterns they do not understand. They ask, why does this keep happening to me? The better question is often, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself? That question requires courage, because it shifts attention away from blaming others and toward understanding ourselves. It asks us to examine the fears we carry, the beliefs we inherited, the stories we've repeated for years, the ways we've abandoned our own needs in order to be accepted, the ways we've settled for less than we deserved, because deep down we didn't believe we deserved more. Healing begins when awareness replaces denial, when you stop running from your emotions and start listening to them, when you stop judging your scars and start understanding them, when you recognize that every painful experience has left clues about what your heart truly needs. The truth is that your pain is not your identity. Your heartbreak is not your identity. Your mistakes are not your identity. They are experiences. They are chapters. They are lessons. But they are not who you are. The moment you understand that, something powerful begins to happen. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of your past. You begin seeing yourself as the author of your future. And from that place, the cycle starts to break. The patterns lose their power. The old fears loosen their grip. The wounds no longer control your decisions. And for the first time in a very long time, you begin moving forward, not from pain, but from wisdom, Martine. My love, there comes a moment in every person's life when they realize they cannot carry everything forever. No matter how strong you are, no matter how much you endure, there are burdens that eventually ask to be released. For years, you may have believed that holding on was a sign of strength. Holding on to the anger, holding on to the disappointment, holding on to the memory of what happened, holding on to the image of how life was supposed to be, holding on to people who have already let go of you, holding on to versions of yourself that no longer exist. At first, it feels like you're protecting something valuable. It feels like letting go means surrendering. It feels like releasing the past somehow invalidates the pain you experienced. But the truth is different. Letting go does not mean what happened was acceptable. It does not mean the wounds were not real. It does not mean the losses were insignificant. It simply means you are no longer willing to allow those experiences to control the rest of your blue life. There is an incredible freedom that begins to emerge when you stop fighting battles that ended years ago. You wake up and notice that your energy is no longer consumed by resentment. Your thoughts become lighter. Your heart becomes quieter. The constant need to prove yourself starts to disappear. You stop chasing people who do not choose you. You stop begging for understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop measuring your value through the opinions of strangers. You stop sacrificing your peace just to keep others comfortable. And slowly, you begin meeting a different version of yourself. Not a perfect version, not a fearless version, not a version untouched by pain, but a wiser version, a calmer version, a more honest version, a version that understands that self-respect is more valuable than approval, a version that understands that peace is more important than being right, a version that understands that healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were before fear convinced you to become someone else. The person you become when you finally let go is not weaker. That person is stronger because they no longer depend on external validation. They no longer need everyone to agree with them. They no longer need every chapter to have a perfect ending. They no longer spend their days looking backward. Instead, they become present. They appreciate small moments. They find beauty in ordinary days. They discover gratitude where they once found only frustration. They learn that happiness is not something waiting in the future. It is something created through the choices made today. And perhaps the most beautiful transformation of all is this. When you finally let go of what is no longer meant for you, you create space. Space for peace. Space for growth. space for love, space for possibility, space for the life that has been patiently waiting for you to stop carrying yesterday into every tomorrow. Because the future cannot fully enter your hands while they remain tightly closed around the fist. My love, after all the lessons, after all the heartbreaks, after all the moments that tested your spirit, life eventually presents you with a choice. Not a choice between success and failure, not a choice between comfort and struggle, but a choice between remaining who you have been and becoming who you are capable of becoming. This choice appears quietly. It rarely announces itself. It arrives in ordinary moments. The moment you decide whether to speak kindly to yourself or continue repeating old criticism. The moment you decide whether to trust again or allow fear to build another wall. The moment you decide whether to keep blaming the past or begin building a future. The moment you decide whether your wounds will become excuses or wisdom. Every day, life asks the same question in different ways. Will you move forward, or will you remain where your pain left you? Many people wait for a perfect moment before making a change. They wait until they feel completely ready. They wait until they are certain. They wait until fear disappears. But the reality is that courage has never been the absence of fear. Courage is moving despite fear. It is taking one step even when the entire path is hidden. It is choosing hope when disappointment would be easier. It is choosing faith when doubt feels more familiar. The truth is that no one is coming to rescue you from the life you refuse to change. No magical day will suddenly arrive and transform everything. Your future is being created right now, in the decisions you make, in the habits you repeat, in the thoughts you believe, in the standards you accept, in the promises you keep to yourself. The life you want begins the moment you stop waiting for permission to live it. And perhaps that is the truth you were meant to hear today. You are more powerful than your fears have led you to believe. You are more capable than your past has convinced you. You are more valuable than the opinions of others could ever determine. The mistakes you made do not define you. The losses you experienced do not define you. The people who left do not define you. What defines you is the choice you make from this moment forward. Will you continue carrying stories that no longer serve you? Or will you begin writing new ones? Will you continue living according to old fears? Or will you allow yourself to discover what exists beyond them? Will you keep looking at life through the lens of what went wrong? Or will you begin seeing the possibilities that still remain? My love, every sunrise offers an invitation to begin again, an invitation to forgive yourself, an invitation to believe that your best days are not necessarily behind you, an invitation to trust that even after loss, growth is possible. Even after heartbreak, love is possible. Even after failure, success is possible. Even after darkness, light is possible. The choice that changes everything is not made once. It is made daily, moment by moment, thought by thought, step by step, and it begins the instant you decide that your future deserves more of your attention than your past ever did. My love, there is one more truth that many people discover far too late. Life is not waiting for you to become perfect before it begins rewarding your efforts. So many beautiful souls spend years postponing their happiness. They tell themselves they will finally live once they achieve more, once they earn more, once they lose the weight, once they find the right relationship, once they overcome every insecurity, once they become the version of themselves they imagine they should be. But perfection is a horizon that keeps moving. No matter how far you travel, it always remains in the distance. And if you spend your entire life chasing perfection, you may never fully experience the life happening right in front of you. The people who seem the strongest are not those who have everything figured out. They are the ones who learn to move forward while still learning. They learn to love while still healing. They learn to dream while still doubting. They learn to show up while still feeling afraid. Because they realize something important. Growth does not happen after you become confident. Growth creates confidence. Healing does not happen after life becomes easy. Healing happens while life continues to challenge you. The greatest mistake you can make is believing that you must wait for the perfect version of duration before allowing yourself to live fully. You are allowed to begin where you are. You are allowed to be a work in progress. You are allowed to have unanswered questions. You are allowed to have scars. You are allowed to have moments of uncertainty. None of those things disqualify you from living a meaningful life. In fact, they are part of being human. There is something incredibly powerful about accepting yourself during the journey instead of only at the destination. Because when you finally stop treating yourself like a problem that needs to be fixed, you create room for something extraordinary. You create room for self-respect. You create room for peace. You create room for gratitude. You create room for joy that is not dependent on circumstances. And perhaps most importantly, you create room for genuine love. Not the kind of love that demands perfection. Not the kind of love that disappears when life becomes difficult, but the kind of love that sees imperfections and stays. The kind of love that begins within. My love, if there is one thing I hope you remember, it is this. You do not need to become someone else to deserve happiness. You do not need to erase your past to create a better future. You do not need universal approval to believe in your own worth. The life you seek is not hidden in some distant future version of yourself. It begins with the person you are today, the person reading these words, the person who has survived every difficult day up to this moment, the person who is still standing despite everything, the person who still carries hope, even if only a small amount remains. Because sometimes a small amount of hope is all that is needed to begin again. And sometimes beginning again is the bravest thing a human heart can do.